What do poisonous dart frogs, fake Rolex watches, and beetles have in common? Confused? Don't worry, it will all make sense in about 5 minutes. The world is a tough place, so organisms must evolve mechanisms to increase their chances for survival and reproduction. One such mechanism is mimicry. Mimicry is the resemblance of one species to another species in a shared environment in order to gain the benefits of the trait being mimicked, such as the protection or avoidance of predators.
For example, these two species of poisonous dart frogs, Allobates separo and Epidobates parvulus, appear identical. They are clearly not closely related, as shown by this phylogenetic tree. However, A. separo mimics E. bilinguus through the use of Batesian mimicry. So how can we determine if a species successfully mimics another species?
Well, a group of researchers, Taniguchi et al., did just this by showing that a species of beetles, Pelacombs, was able to evade a predator, a tree frog, Hyla japonica, by mimicking a species of ants, Lasius spathipus, that share that same predator. To prove mimicry is present, the group devised an experiment by first separating the predator into two groups, A and B. Both groups were starved of food to ensure they were hungry. Group A was then served beetles, which they ate, while Group B were served ants, which they did not eat. Both groups were then served mealworms to see if they were still hungry, where only Group B ate. This part of the experiment shows that the beetles are edible to the frogs, while the ants are not. The second part of the experiment again began by starving the frogs. This time, Group A were served the ants, while Group B were served beetles. Group A tried to eat the ants, as Group B did in Part 1, while Group B avoided and did not eat the beetles. After this, both groups ate the mealworms when offered, showing that they were both hungry. This second part of the experiment shows that the frogs previously exposed to the ants did not eat the beetles. As seen in this figure, where the black represents attacking of the beetle and the white represents avoidance of the beetle. This graph shows that the frogs avoided the beetle only after first being exposed to the ants. This suggests the beetles reminded Group B frogs of the ants, causing them to avoid the beetles entirely, even though the beetles are a tasty meal. These results demonstrate that the beetles successfully mimic the ants, though the exact trait they mimic has yet to be found.
As you may have already noticed, in order for mimicry to work, the predators must learn to avoid the trait that is harmful or unpleasant to them. However, this trait may not have to be mimicked very accurately in order to be effective. This is seen in the paper by Hallan et al., where wild great tit birds were used as the predator and the almonds were used as the prey. The almonds were marked with either a square, diamond, or a cross to simulate the different species. Both the diamond and square were then treated with a bad tasting substance, while the cross remained untreated, acting as the control. The birds were then fed these three groups of almonds, where they learned to avoid the squares and diamonds due to the bad taste. The next parts of the experiment varied first the level of distastefulness, one shape at a time. Then varied both the shape and the level of distastefulness. For example, in this treatment, a mix of both diamonds and squares was served to the birds, but both shapes had varied levels of distastefulness. Diamonds were both high and low, and squares were both high and low. Altogether, two aspects were varied, the level of bad taste and the shape. However, the birds did not distinguish between the levels of grossness and instead avoided the shapes altogether and only ate the cross, or the untreated almonds. This is seen in the figure where all treatments resulted in around the same number of prey being eaten, except for when the taste was moderate, the default level of distastefulness, and the signal was not varied. In this case, the birds ate more of the prey, indicating that when the punishment was less severe, the birds were slow to learn to avoid that prey. Overall, these results show that not only are predators able to learn to avoid characteristics of prey that are associated with unpleasant or harmful effects, but also that the mimicry does not always have to be completely accurate to work.
But wait, there's more. Not only is mimicry in the wild, but is also seen in the human world. For instance, when shopping for a new watch or purse, you may have noticed that some of these products are not the actual brand names you're looking to purchase, but are fake versions or knockoffs. These knockoff versions mimic the actual brand to get the benefits of that brand, which in this case is recognition and social status. When you buy the fake version of Rolex or Coach, you get the same recognition as the actual brands, even though it is actually lower quality. Much like how the beetle in our previous example receives the same benefits of the ant, being able to avoid the predator frog without actually being an ant.
So let's sum up what we've learned today. We've seen that there's a struggle for survival in this tough world, and that some species have developed a strategy for survival known as mimicry, where a species will resemble traits of another species to gain some benefit of the species being mimicked. We saw this in the example of the poisonous dart frogs, the beetles, and in our own analogy with knockoff brands. We also learned that mimicry does not always have to be very accurate to work, as seen with the almond example. All of this mimicry has ultimately evolved for a greater chance of an organism's genes being passed on. We hope you've enjoyed this look into the details of how organisms increase their chances of survival through mimicry.